Yesterday we saw Jeremy Hunt coming out of this famous door to go to the House of Commons to deliver his autumn statement. Today we're about to go in to ask him all about it.
We're going to talk about tax cuts, public spending cuts, immigration numbers and how he feels about Suella leaving the government.
Welcome to the newsagents from Downing Street.
Chancellor, welcome back to the Newsagents. It's lovely to be here in Downing Street, number 11 Downing Street. We've got two papers. You might not have seen them yet today. What are the chances of that? The Times says Hunt eases the tax burden, and the Financial Times says tax burden surges despite Hunt cuts. Who's right?
Well, in their own way, they're both right, because the tax burden has gone up because I think we did the right thing. We supported families in the pandemic. The furlough scheme saved around 9 million jobs. And we also supported people in the cost of living crisis caused by the invasion of Ukraine. And those are the right things to do. But you have to pay down that debt. And so I took some pretty difficult decisions last year, including on things like the tax thresholds. But partly as a result of those difficult decisions, and partly because the economy's been more resilient than nearly everyone expected, we ended up with more tax revenues. And because of that, I decided, because I'd always said when I can, I want to bring down taxes. So I've made a start, but I'm not saying, and I would never say, that I am bringing down the taxes right the way down to the level they were before we started this process. It's something I'd like to do when it's affordable, but I couldn't do it all in one go.
But Chancellor, it's like you opening your wallet, giving me a £10 note and saying, here's an invoice for 15 quid for it.
Well, it's like me saying that in order to stop the roof falling in your house, I've had to use some money to mend it, and things have gone a bit better since then, and so I can afford to give you some of that back. Yes, and I would like to be able to bring down taxes further, but I can't get there all at once.
But when Conservative put out a press release saying this is the biggest tax cut in history, that's a very misleading claim and statement, isn't it? Because as you've just said so eloquently yourself, yes, the tax burden has gone up.
Well, it's not misleading in the sense that, first of all, we're not hiding from the fact that we had to take difficult decisions. I think, as I say,
would you have written that press release?
Well, let me finish. Let me answer your question in full, John. It's not misleading for two reasons. First of all, it is in its own right a significant tax cut. It's £450 for someone on the average salary, and that is a significant tax cut. But secondly, it is also a statement of purpose. It is a statement that we believe if we're going to grow the economy and be successful, we actually need to bring taxes down as we can afford to do so. And so it is a statement of the direction that we intend to go in, because we think that's the right thing for the long-term prosperity of the economy.
But you talked about difficult decisions. The thing that would really help people, the thing that would really make a difference to their tax, is if you index the tax bands. If you actually said you're not going to have your tax dragged into higher bands because of inflation, we can solve that now. We can give you that tax money back.
That is a really fair question to ask, because a lot of the increase in tax that's happened has been because of the threshold freezes that were introduced by the Prime Minister when he was Chancellor, and also by me. So why didn't we reverse those, which is what we could have done.
7 million people
yes,
affected.
That's what we could have done. That's absolutely right. First of all, on those freezes, because prior to those, we actually doubled the threshold at which you pay tax or national insurance, even after the threshold freezes continue, because they still carry on for another 4 years. 2 million, nearly 2 million fewer people are paying tax or national insurance than they would have in 2010. But let me answer your question really. Why didn't I do that? Why did I do national insurance instead? Because when faced with a choice as what to do, I chose the things that were going to make the biggest difference to the growth in the economy. And the cut in national insurance, the 2% cut from 12% to 10%, according to the OBR, they say that adds the equivalent of 94,000 people into our national workforce. Because when you cut a tax on work, more people want to work, and people in work want to work longer hours. There's about 1 million vacancies in the economy, so I'm filling nearly 1 in 10 of the vacancies in the economy by that cut in national insurance. By the way, it's also a more progressive thing to do than unfreezing.
So you're not going to do that? I guess that's the question. You're not going to index those bands then?
Well, I don't want to predict what might happen at future fiscal events because I've literally got no idea. I didn't know that we were going to have this extra room to do this cut until about a month ago. But what I will say is my priority will always be to do things for the long-term growth and prosperity of the economy. And so the two tax cuts, by the way, even more expensive than the cut in national insurance of 2%, was the capital allowances, the full expensing for businesses. That's a tax cut that virtually no one in the dog and duck cares about or asks for, has a massive impact on the amount of money that businesses invest. That was our priority.
Just one of the other choices that you made was about not going ahead with getting a cut in inheritance tax. You used the word progressive a moment ago, which I thought was interesting, because that is not a progressive tax cut, is it? I just wonder where the idea came from that was going to happen.
Well, I think you can find a reason why any tax you mention is a bad tax. Inheritance tax discourages people from saving for their families. Income tax has negative effects. National insurance has negative effects. So you can find arguments against any tax. So when you've got the opportunity to bring down taxes, my choice was to prioritise. The OBR say that our long-term growth is going to be 1.6% going forward. We happen to have grown faster than countries like France, Germany, or Italy. Notwithstanding that, and the IMF actually thinks we'll continue to grow faster than going forward. But I don't think that's high enough. I want us to grow faster. So the measures I took are ones that will unlock investment and growth going forward. Let's
spell things out, because growth is at zero, and we know that the OBR has downgraded growth in each of the next 3 years. And we also know that they believe you found 20 billion for tax cuts by deciding not to protect public services. I mean, let's let that sink in. What will this do to public services now? What will this do to cuts to police, to care, to courts, to prisons? All the unprotected departments now facing a 1.8 real terms cut.
I absolutely accept that we will need to show discipline in public spending. After the decisions I took yesterday, public spending at the end of the next Parliament will be £86 billion higher in real terms than it was at the start of this Parliament. But I don't deny for one moment.
It's a cut.
No, it's an £86 billion higher in real terms. So it's
but in those unprotected departments.
Yeah, no, I accept. Let me finish. Let me answer the question. I fully accept that there will be lots of challenges in delivering it. But what I completely reject is that this is a decision not to protect our public services. The only way that we will be able to afford to fund the NHS. Let's say in 5 years' time we have a cure for Alzheimer's, which we're not too far away from. It would be an amazing thing. I would like us to be able to afford that for everyone in the country. It would be an amazing thing to do. The only way we can do that is if we unlock growth and unlock growth at higher levels.
Well, not the only way. The way to do that is to say, I'm going to ring fence any money that's involved in a fiscal headroom, that terrible phrase, to actually look after public services. I mean, you told me, I think it was 2019, about your regrets to the cuts that you had inflicted on people in social care in exactly that area.
Emily, if I may say, the assumption behind what you've just said is so left-wing. I need to say this to you because you are saying that the only way that you can increase resources going into public spending is to give more of the cake to public spending and less to tax cuts. What Conservatives believe is you can grow the size of the cake.
This is not me saying it. It's the OBR. Do you find them left-wing? It's the IFS saying the same thing. That we are in the ballpark now for austerity cuts in the shape of the Osborne years. That's their words, not mine, okay?
Well, I'm not going to get into... I'm very happy to call you left-wing, but I'm not going to call the OBR or the IFS left-wing because what they are doing is they are looking at a 3, 4, 5-year horizon when I fully accept that there will be discipline needed in public spending. What I am saying, as someone who's passionate about the NHS, having been responsible for it for some time, is that if we want to have a long-term future for a publicly funded NHS that can do all the things we want, then we need to get our growth rate up to beyond the kind of 1.6% that the OBR are predicting.
Yeah, and the OBR are predicting that growth is going to slow down over the next 3 years. And let's get away from kind of labels whether something is left-wing or right-wing, because I just think
because you're so reasonable in the middle ground, John. Agreed, but
I do think this is I mean, we've spoken to Treasury people today who have said to us that there is no way you're going to be able to make these budget cuts in departmental budgets. It's going to be very, very tight. And compared to the Osborne years, which came after Labour had been spending big, there aren't those big savings to be had in the same way, and they will have a very direct effect. I don't think that is a left-wing or a right-wing question to talk about the public services that people will get.
Well, what I'm saying to you is that I have a very different view about how we find more money for public services. We need to focus on growing the economy. But I do want to answer your question, because 6 months ago, I asked the Treasury what it would take to stabilise knowing what we know about the growth in funding that's going to be needed by the NHS, the care system, with an ageing population, what it would take to stabilise the proportion of GDP being taken up by tax, because a lot of discussion about that going up. And they said to me, they did a lot of work on this, that they said if we could increase public sector productivity growth by 0.5% a year, you would actually stabilise the proportion of GDP taken by tax. Now, I don't believe that is impossible. Challenging, yes, but I don't believe it's impossible. And we've got a very big programme that is designed to do that. So I think it is possible to run the NHS more efficiently, to run the police service more efficiently. And by the way, I think it would be welcomed by people on the front line who are very frustrated. I was talking to someone in the fire service on Saturday about their IT systems. Those are the kinds of changes we now need to be making.
Okay, I want to talk about living standards. Ronald Reagan famously asked the question in 1980, are you feeling better off than you were 4 years ago? It is clear, looking at the numbers, that Britons are worse off in terms of family income than they were at the last general election. Do you accept that?
Well, it's hardly surprising when you've had a pandemic, a once-in-a-century pandemic, a 1970s-style energy crisis, which has seen air bills hiked. It's hardly. Hang on. Let me answer the question, John. It's hardly surprising that it has an impact on living standards. Now, I don't know what the situation will be at the next election, but what I would say is that the British economy has outperformed expectations. So
it's
a
year
ago,
No,
it's not. It's great. The OBR say it's going to grow by 0.6%. And by the way, Emily, a year ago when I became Chancellor, they said it was going to contract by 1.4%.
Wait,
hang on, I want to answer the question on living standards.
Let me do
living standards
just
now.
do that one, though, because you take us back to...
Okay, on living standards.
Can you just let me answer the question on living standards?
Go on.
Come on, let's be friends.
Yep.
Okay, living standards, you asked me. A year ago, the OBR thought the living standards were going to go down by 3.7%. Now they think it's going to go up this year by 2.5%. A year ago, they thought growth was down by 1.4%. It's going to go up by 0.6%. And the moral there is don't bet against the resilience of the British economy. We have done much better than anyone predicted.
But the OBR, again, as we've established, not left-wing, say it will be the biggest reduction in living standards since records began in the 1950s.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. And all I will say, Emily, is that a year ago, the Bank of England said we were going to have the longest recession for 100 years, and that hasn't happened. So I don't think we should assume that the British economy is necessarily as weak as everyone thinks.
Okay, how difficult is it to go into a general election with the fact being there that the British people may well be worse off than they were at the last election?
Well, I think what the British people want is politicians who deal with the crises, the difficult situations, in a way that is best for the long-term interests of the country. And if I take the example of the pandemic, Rishi Sunak put in place one of the most generous support schemes anywhere in the world, with the furlough scheme, the bounce back loans, and as a result of which we have bounced back better from the pandemic than countries like Germany. I think it was the right thing to do. Of course, you pay a political price because we have to now pay down our COVID debt. I've had to take all the decisions we've just been talking about earlier on. So I don't think they are blind to the fact that we've had these huge shocks that have affected countries up and down the world. And I would say the right question to ask is not, are you better off than you were a few years ago, given that we've had these huge global shocks, but how have we fared compared to other countries that have had similar shocks? And I would say that, if you look at our record since 2010, if you look at countries that we normally compare ourselves to, like France, Germany or Italy, we've grown faster than them. And that, is not least because of some of the economic policies that have been followed by Conservative governments. But is that enough? I want to grow faster, and I want to be able to fund the NHS in the future. I'd like to be able to bring down the tax burden. So that's why I announced those 110 measures yesterday.
You talked about making progress on some of your economic points in Rishi Sunak's 5 plans. The immigration figures were out today. We are now hitting an all-time high in the last 12 months. You were in David Cameron's government when he was predicting immigration would be in the tens of thousands. It's sitting at, 672,000. What happened to the plan?
Well, I think there have been, particular reasons why those numbers are high, and I think it's probably for the Home Secretary to explain those. But what I would like to say in terms of our economic model is that we have got to change the model from saying that we are going to fill vacancies in our economy, of which, as I said before, we've got around 1 million, with labour from overseas, given that we have around 6 million adults of working age who are not in work, many of whom would like to work. And that is enormous wasted potential.
So that kind of contradicts the fact that the numbers are now at 670,000. I mean, if you're not saying we want those people for work, and your party, the new Conservatives have said it's do or die on the immigration numbers now. I mean, you've got a mutiny there.
Well, what I said yesterday is that working with Mel Stride, we're going to make very big changes to the way the welfare system operates. And in particular, at the moment, we have a benefit called LCWRA, where you are basically not just signed off on benefit, but given no requirement to look for any work at all. Around 100,000 people are signed off on that every year because of illness or disability. Let me just finish.
But this is about immigration, isn't it? Am I getting this confused?
It is, because what's happening is that our national workforce is contracting by about 100,000 a year, and that is creating demand for immigration from businesses that say, care homes that say, I can't find people at home, so I need to bring them in from overseas. What I announced yesterday is going to halve the flow of people onto that particular type of benefit. It'll take time to get there. We want to do it in a compassionate way. We're going to do it by increasing mental health support and things like that. But that is a very big change.
You're looking at every budget and where money can be saved, of course, as part of the budget. Has the £140 million spent on Rwanda been money well spent?
I think it will be when we get that scheme going. I think it is the right thing to deter the people smuggling business by a scheme that makes it clear that if you arrive illegally in the UK, there is a reasonable or high chance that you will end up being deported. And then we can have a proper, compassionate policy towards asylum seekers, but one where we have proper democratic control over the numbers of people coming here.
We're not going to see that 140 million come back, are we, from Rwanda?
Well, you don't think so, but we believe that we will get flights going. We need to make changes, obviously following the Supreme Court ruling, and we will make the changes we need to make.
We haven't talked to you since all the big changes in the Cabinet. Suella Braverman's gone. Is the government better off without her?
Well, there were specific reasons why the Prime Minister made the decision that he did, and I don't think it's right for me to comment on Cabinet colleagues or former Cabinet colleagues. But I think we have a very good team. I'm very happy with the team of people around the table. And what I would say is that reshuffle was interpreted by a lot of people as, is it a move to the centre, having been a more right-wing Cabinet? That's not what Rishi Sunak is trying to do. No, what he wants to do is surround himself with a competent team of deliverers, I think it's show not tell, and we've got to show people we're delivering on what we say.
Ben Houchen, the Tory Mayor of Teesside, has called on James Cleverly to apologise for dragging Stockton's name through the mud. He allegedly called it a shithole yesterday, having called the Rwanda policy batshit. I'm just wondering if you find that competent from your cabinet colleagues and whether he should apologise to Ben Houchen.
Well, I think you'll have to ask him, because I believe that his team are saying that he didn't actually say that, but I was sitting next to the Prime Minister's question, so I have no idea what was actually said.
Just one other thing. You've given £7 million to combat anti-Semitism in this country, and yet Rishi Sunak couldn't say anything about regretting being with Elon Musk, who turns out to be not only the world's richest man, but a very prominent anti-Semite too.
Well, obviously I don't agree with what Elon Musk did. It was after his meeting with Rishi Sunak. But I think that, we have, as leaders of the country, I don't think anyone would say that Rishi Sunak could have been stronger in his support for Israel in the weeks that have passed since October the 7th.
There's an anti-Semitism march at the weekend. Will members of the Cabinet go?
I don't know. But what I would say is that I think I made a very clear statement yesterday. I think one of the days that I will remember for the rest of my life was when I visited Auschwitz, and I think we are absolutely united in our desire to make sure that there is never, ever a return to anti-Semitism in the UK.
Chancellor,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much.
We've just come out, and it's obviously really great to be able to sit down with the Chancellor for half an hour. I wonder how much more difficult his task was this time than last year, because last year, let's face it, he wasn't Kwasi Kwarteng, and the Prime Minister wasn't Liz Truss.
Yeah.
And you've now got a kind of sensible, rational, reasonable, calmly spoken, compassionate Conservative who talks about sort of progressive taxation policies. And he sounds very caring in the process.
Yeah, one thing I think is important is that he compares where he is today to where he was last year. Now, if you said to him, oh really, so you're comparing yourself to the Liz Truss government, the Kwasi Kwarteng chancellorship, I'm not sure he'd like it. But a lot of the stuff is his reminding us of things that haven't happened. There was going to be a big recession, now it hasn't. And I think if you base what you've done just on the past year, then clearly you're going to be able to talk about the lack of recession, clearly you're going to talk about, the start of growth, but actually what we have learned today is that there are things that have not happened that worry many in Whitehall, and that is about these massive cuts to public spending that are coming down the tunnel at us, whether it is from the Conservatives or whether it is from a brand new Labour government after a potential election victory.
I thought there was also an element of deliberately playing the man or the person or the woman in saying that was a very left-wing question. And I think
he did that last time, didn't he?
Well, he did that to me last time over the issue of Europe. But I thought what he was doing was not attacking you or me, although maybe indirectly a little bit he was, but as if to say that anyone who talks about public services in the way that, and let's face it, a lot of Treasury people are talking like that, the IFS are talking like that, all sorts of people are saying there's going to be a huge squeeze on public services. To say because you're cutting their funding, that means they're going to face difficulties, that's apparently a left-wing question.
Well, I think he was trying to create the intellectual space for saying just because we're trying to go for growth doesn't mean that these departments will be cut. But I think he is vulnerable on this. And you notice that because he had to call it a left-wing a position, even though I was quoting the OBR, which is the watchdog that oversees the government's decisions, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies. And I think when you're dealing with the pushback from economists, from economic bodies that you respect, then it suggests you are feeling like you're in a slightly tight corner if you have to call everything left-wing. And
also, if you are making the argument that growth is going to deliver everything, growth, of course, will, kind of alleviate the impact of spending cuts.
Not if your projections say that growth is going to tumble over the next 3 years.
Exactly, and that is why you need to frame it in those terms. So I'm kind of not taking it too personally.
Not this time.
But there was method in what he did, I thought.
Yeah.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.